Recording. Cool. Cool. All right, we're gonna touch up. Oh, I don't know why that just lagged. Hold on. I made it pretty ugly. Never mind. Oh, well, just deal with it. I don't know why it's laggy on my end today. Anyways, right, looking at EURUSD. Could even start on DXY, to be honest. Right, this is the entire shift here. Referencing last week, right? Honestly, I don't remember at all what I said last week. I mean, on Saturday, I do not remember. Right, so something that you could have kept in mind, right, was, where are my tools? Oh, my tools aren't showing. Oh well. So pretty much, right, the one thing that stands out here, right, this push up, let down, right, technically should have continued, right, but for pretty much this entire week-ish, right, we could have easily seen continuation to the downside, right, which is pretty much what happened. Right, now the invalidation point is here because, right, this created our lower low. So in theory, I would not like to see that be taken out, right? So this essentially created equal highs, right? And honestly, I expected the 50% here to be tapped before we actually continued lower, just because I have mentioned, right, that this here is a ton of liquidity sitting, right? And it just did not make sense to me that we didn't come back and test these areas before we gave a moon or actually just continued lower. So this was pretty much the overall catalyst to why I believe that we were not able to reach higher, right? So looking at this now from an intraday standpoint, right, looking at structure, right, like I said, it's my invalidation point, this is my entire push down, right? But in order to give a pullback, we have to break levels of structure in order to come up, right? So, right, high, low, right, created our last high. We have a pullback, right? So in theory, this should continue, right, if it's going to lead into the break of structure, right? But we cannot assume as is until that happens, right? But after our pullback here, right, this struggled to come back up, right? Whereas in other times, it'll struggle for a little bit, which is pretty much here, right? And then it'll give a push. But unfortunately, reaction here gave no follow through, right? So when we're looking at this now from even smaller time frames, right, I'm anticipating this to be the move that comes up, right? But, oh, it sucks we don't have volume on here, right? But, right, if we're looking at this now, right, let's say we're anywhere here, right, this looks very impulsive in comparison to this push up, right? So in theory, this was our final push downside, potentially a mitigation inside of this wick, right? And that's reflected very, very, well, inversely, but very, very convincingly in EURUSD, right? So as you guys know, I've been bullish on this forever, right? I have never ever been bearish on this, right? I even said this is not a distribution to me. I've said that for weeks, right? But the only issue was actually finding buy scenarios, right? And I'm a little sad that these positions here actually broke even for me, right? But I still had one down here. If you reference the Zoom here, I think I explained that around the 28th, right? So if this was going to continue, we would have reached this area of interest, right? And we would have completely shot down, right? So the only way for this to be the catalyst to create a lower low is if we break these, previous structures, right? This is the last two pushes, or the last two drops before we created this final higher high. So once that was taken, right, that was essentially the shift of momentum to the downside, right? But keep in mind that from an overall macro bias, or an overall bias, right, all this move technically was is a pullback, right? Just like this, right? Just like this, right? Technically just a pullback to a continuation. Because in order for this structure to essentially break now, was you would have needed to see this, right, be broken after that tap into area of interest up here, right? But that's not what happened, right? And that's because, to me, the narrative was never to the downside. It never made sense in my eyes to actually give, or actually take the risk to sells unless it's a potential hedge, right? So the only times I ever sold was as a hedge, and those ended up breaking even, right? So as I'm looking at this, right, a very key point that I've noticed, especially for flags that tend to fail, right, I like to see flags, right, start, and if it's a false flag, I never want to see the initial point be broken. I want to see it. I want to see this go the opposite direction before that happens, right? Because then, in theory, right, that's a structure break, right? So then you would naturally want to continue lower, right? So here, right, this is the shift of momentum that we talked about back in the end of last month, right? And then we had the break of structure, right? Meaning this is the first impulsive move to the upside, right? Essentially the beginning of this flag. So the flag doesn't necessarily start until here, right? So this is where your flag starts. So to me, that invalidation point, right, is here, right? And the only reason why I would ever even see that being taken is if potentially, right, this wick that took out that wick there, don't know if you guys can see that, right? There's a wick here that took that wick, right? There could be potentially something there. So the only way for me to fully, dedicate my bias to being sells is if this point was cleared, right? But the cool thing here was, from an intraday standpoint, right, I'm seeing these are the final pushes. Well, technically here, there, right? Once we actually started to retrace here, right, it actually came back with some decent level of momentum, right? And then from there, during Asian session, we started to range, right? So I knew that during, whether it was London or New York, right, if we have this range and we push up to potentially grab an SC here, right, this is gonna continue lower, 100%, right? But the opposite happened, right? Because there's technically this range here, consolidation. So I knew we could either do this or we could do this, right? So what actually ended up happening here, right, we had our Asian essentially consolidation here. Asian consolidation here. We came down, right? Obviously there's no volume, right? Even when there's no volume, there's still volume diminishment, right? So it doesn't make sense. This move is coming down, but no volume is supporting it. That doesn't make sense, right? So I'm gonna wait to see what structure tells me, right? So as this is happening, right, I'm seeing obviously this overall bearish movement, right? But this retracement was pretty deep, right? 90% retracement. Now these are relative equal highs. There's liquidity there, but I'm not trying to assume I'm not trying to assume, right, an entry until the structure breaks in this scenario, right? So right, we then come back down, right? We don't create a lower low, liquidity grab. Why? Because we literally just came, took out the low, and immediately reacted. Not only that, reacted with momentum, right? So this is now showing me its hand, right? Technically, we have been bearish due to structure, right? But now I have an incentive to want to look for buys, right? So we now have momentum, right? Broke structure. If we go to M5, right, we actually came back to top the open here, but unfortunately I wanted this 3-minute here, right? But unfortunately I didn't get it, right? So I got in right here, right? And the reason why I got in there, right, is this POI, right? This is where the 3-minute opens, right? In order for me to take this entry, I would have wanted it to be the pullback of the initial break of structure, right? So therefore I have a parameter to play, which is my SO there, right? And then see this moon. But because this tapped the 5-minute open and then led to a break of structure, I now want this to be my point of invalidation, right? If we break this, essentially this candle low, then this entire scenario to me is invalid, right? So if there's two ways to play this here, right? So right after the break of structure here, right, you see equal lows, right? Equal lows here, right? So I know that there's potentially an SC here. That's the only way this is going to happen, right? And the reason why I say it's the only way, right, there's potentially a POI here, right? But there's equal lows, right? So remember what I tell you guys, right? Liquidity is meant to not to derive your bias, right, but more so to have a target, right? So who's to say that from a micro scale this isn't a target, right? So I don't have enough confirmation, enough confidence to want to take it here because I'm unsure from this, right? And if you want another example of that, I'll show you after this, right? So technically, based off the parameter of not being able to be inside those seconds time frames, right, I know that my entry has to be anywhere inside of here. Right, my SC or my inefficiency has to be somewhere inside of here, right? And also keep in mind when we are approaching the zone, right, diminishment of volume, right? So now I just need an excuse to want to risk, right? So we see that initial tap, right? Structure hasn't technically broken yet, right? But we gave a reaction and then we came back down, right? But there's no more volume appearing itself, meaning the willingness to continue lower isn't really, you know, the best. So in theory, you can take your entry anywhere there. A sub below here, that's still like a 2 to 3 pip stop. Yeah, it's still like a 2 pip. Yeah, that would have been 2 pip. Yeah. But if you have your seconds time frames, right, you now see this is the point, right, that broke structure here, right? But the candle open is here, right? There's one final push down before that move up, right? And now you can clearly see that this, right, this is that last push down before up. So this adds a lot of clarity to me, right? This is now a POI, right? That's, well, essentially this candle's a POI, right? But because we know how SCs work, right, open, for a bullish one, it's obviously from the open to the low, right? So that's your POI there, right? But the odds of catching this is very tough. So I have the entire M1 POI pointed out there, right? And I also have right, the second potential POI here. So as long as I even tap that, right, I'm gonna take my risk, right, 2-pip stop. All right, so that entire change of character, right, was derived from, first off, this original BOS, but two is like my overall bias is still bullish, right, because technically I don't have a reason not to be, right, from an overall scale, right, from an intraday scale, right, there's plenty of opportunities for potential sell opportunities, right, there, even there, right, you would have gone there and then broken even, right, but keep in mind that the overall narrative is still to the upside. So until I'm proven otherwise, right, I'm not going to support that bias, right? So now looking at where we are now, right, this is now my point of invalidation, right? This is that final push down that led to that higher high, right? So in theory, this should not break if this is to continue, right? Like this won't do that, right? It doesn't make sense. So touching on this morning's price action, right? I'm pretty sure most of you saw the reaccumulation that I posted in the free channel, right? So these are right. So the second I pretty much acknowledge that there is a schematic here, right, is here, right? And why do I say that? Because look at where the biggest level of volume is, right here, automatically making this my buying climax, right? So this makes this my preliminary supply, buying climax, right? Notice that this break structure, right, that's just the automatic reaction, right? But the overall push here that created that high, right, has been maintained, right? So technically, scalping break of structure, not minor intraday break of structure, right? So we come back for technically a secondary test, right? But we then come down for a liquidity grab, right, and gave an automatic reaction, right? So following this here, right, this is where this is where overlap started, right? Automatically, my POI was here. This was my first POI, and I thought I had missed it at first, right? And this is another instance of what I just showed you, but on a pretty much on a smaller scale here, right? Right, so we see here, right, create a push, takes out previous high. This is now a micro break of structure, right, which then leads to the pullback that didn't come back to my SC that I wanted, right, which on the seconds time frame right is there, right, but that initial pullback created a higher high here, right? So as you can see, this is now your point of invalidation, and that's technically where it reacted, right? Didn't really make much sense to me during this time, right? But I knew that I wanted, right, my SC to top, because I know that even if I took this position up, there's still the possibility that we can come top this SC. And the reason why I'm so confident in the SC is because of the rules, right? It follows the criteria. Right, so it's not the last potential mitigation that filled inefficiency, potentially mitigated something here, right, that then created a very impulsive move to the opposite direction, right, and it was not tapped before, right? So what actually happened after that, right, was that then that led to a scalping break of structure here, right? That now this is my point of invalidation, right? So right, when price actually came back here, right? This initial tap, I saw this and I was like, oh, fuck, right? Like I thought I'd missed it there, right? But also I keep in mind, right, that even if I was to enter here, I don't really have a confirmation, right? Our structure is still bearish in this instance, right? So the only way for me to even consider this POI is if there's a diminishment of volume, right? Because we already have the structure confirmation, we have the bias confirmation, right? We have an SC confirmation. So now I'd like to see the volume diverge, which it did, right? Down to this last push here, right? Diminishment of volume, right? This is what's going to promote the reaction, the reactive move, right? That's what's gonna cause that, is the volume instability, right? So my position was actually, let's see here, around the 50% of this, right? Keep in mind, remember the seconds time frame was actually around the 50%, and I'll show you right here. Right, you see that around the 50%, right? So right, so naturally right here, 2 pips stop, right? Could have even been smaller, could have been a 1.5, right? Right, TP1, create new high, right? But if anything, this is my area of partialing, and then also my pretty much the area that validates the entire bias, right? Because we now have 2 levels of structure broken, right? On top of, right, the next target being the buying climax, right? And then this now is considered an SOS, right? But now my only issue, right, is schematics, right? I've said this before, schematics only work when narrative fits it, right? But keep in mind, we're buying high as hell, right? This is like the end of a pullback, right? If you saw this exact same sequence here, then I'd be so much more confident in holding it, right? Because it makes sense, because we've already had a corrective move, but we're in the middle of an impulse, right? And I'm technically aiming for here, right, to take out this high, right? Because even though it's a short-term trade, I know that if we take this high out, right, we have now broken structure, because this is the high that broke the low. So now if we take that out, right, that's now a break of structure. So now even if this breaks even because of a pullback, right, I know that I've taken my partials, and I know that my bias is now secure. So now the positions that I have here, I can now solidify to, or not solidify, but I can now prove my bias, or now emphasize my bias, right? Right, so I really like that we did this, and I like that we broke that high, and now we're breaking this high, right? So now this has no reason for me to incline myself to want to think anything other than bullish, right? And something I noticed too, right, was this re-entry here, right? So this is something I've also been trying to quote-unquote name, right? But this is something that I've always pretty much used, right? And every time I see a struggle in price and then a continuation, right, we tend to come back to then continue higher, right? And what does that pretty much show? Technically, this could be considered a reaccumulation on a smaller time frame, right? I'll just call it a point of turbulence, because we struggled and then gave an impulse, right? And then we typically like to come back to then continue, right? So I saw here, right, which is actually a 15-minute inefficiency, right? So price came back, filled inefficiency to then continue, right? So I'd love to see the same thing happen here. Point of turbulence, continuation, continue higher. That's what I would love to see tonight during New York, right? I'd love to see this setup during London and then catch a continuation in New York, right? That's essentially what I would love to see here, because I really want to see this H4 high be substantially taken out. I want to see even this high and this high be challenged, right? But from an overall scale, right, this is, I consider this a major intraday high that can then created this major intraday low, but this entire leg here started here, right? So my next target to fully validate my bias is that high, right? And I would love to see this continuation here, right? Also retest structure to then continue higher, right? That's essentially what I would love to see, right? Not to mention that these very bearish candles, unsupported volume, right? So other than that, I mean, that's EURUSD. Doesn't make sense, right? It never made sense for it to go lower. It still doesn't to me. So we'll go from there. We'll see what happens when we go to our potential POIs tonight, and then we'll go from there. Another one, EURGBP, right? This will be the last one for tonight. Click the star bottom left. Oh, wow, that's annoying. I do not use TradingView enough for this, right? So remember what I told you guys, right? I'm paying attention to what created this lower low from an overall scale, and that was here, right? And the only logical reasoning that I could think of as to why price would even come back to test this was because of the fact that even though this is the last high that created the last low here, right, this was a liquidity grab, meaning there's volume inside of here which promoted that push out to take out liquidity, whether it was to just take out the liquidity or whether it was to mitigate something here, right? It was actually a 15-minute something, I forgot. Pretty sure we talked about it. But anyways, right, this is my point of invalidation, right? Because this created this entire leg down. So naturally, right, doesn't matter how the pullback is, in theory, right, this point should not be broken, right? So sadly, right, I broke even at the high here. Where are we? Cool. So this was the liquidity grab here. Right, so I see this final push up, then we struggle downwards, give one last push, then come down, right? So I kept my POI pretty big, right? Whether it could have been inefficiency fill here, or it could have been a potential SC inside of this last push up, right? So that was my reference point. And when we came to it, I forgot which time frame this was. Was it 15? I'm trying to remember where I had my POI at. Nope. I'm trying to remember, but my entry was somewhere from this M5 inefficiency, right? It was somewhere here, right? And that gave the reaction, and I thought that was it, right? So some partials were taken, but unfortunately I broke even, right? And then this came back to take liquidity at a very stupid time, right? A couple hours before daily open, right? And fortunately, right, the move happened after that, right? But luckily there was actually another entry here. I'm trying to remember where this POI was, right? So this was the first POI, right? I saw some wick in here, and then this was the second potential POI. I'm trying to remember exactly what time frame this was. I'm pretty sure it was 3 minute. Okay, so there was 2 POIs for me, right? Potentially these 2 pushes up, or this full SC here, right? But right, I saw something here on M1. Right, so here, right, look at where the volume starts, right? The last push up here that took liquidity, right, started here. We then came down, broke structure, and that was mitigated there, right? So Then we came down, right? We then had this candle before we continued lower, right? From there, we had a retracement, continuation lower, retracement, left equal highs, right? And now we have an M1SE here, right? So this is my POI, right? It's from potentially the inefficiency fill or from there, right? But I'm going to keep my stop there because there's always the crazy possibility that there could be something inside that wick. There's always the crazy possibility. So I'm going to count myself for it. So that's about a pip and a half, not even half a pip range, right? So in theory, even a 1 pip stop there is perfect, right? And then that's what created that entire move to the downside, right? So it's a pretty sick trade, to be honest. Right, and then from there, we have now broken structure. So I would love to see it not break there, right? This would be another one of those points that I call turbulence points, right? I would love to see that. Right, so you see the overall structure never broke, right? Intraday levels of structure broke, but the overall never broke. Can you check GU too? I have not traded GU, to be honest. 1 to 100, bro. You know 1 to 100 is so common. I just don't teach you guys to look for that stuff. I teach you guys to look for what creates 1 to 100s, but I don't teach you to go for 1 to 100s. Right? Honestly, most of my swings are way over 1 to 100 if you really pay attention. Right? Most of my stops are 2 to 3 pips. My goal is a swing. Well, you got to make intradays before you get to a swing, bro. Process. Right, so now this is broken structure. I would really love to see some kind of continuation. Right, and the reason why I'm not looking for a premium here, is because of how much momentum there is. But to account for partials. Is it 1 to, yeah, no, it's not. That's why I don't call them 1 to 100s, bro. It's not a 1 to 100, bro. This is what pisses me off, right? So you guys know who I wonder who's known me here the longest. Who's known me here the longest? I wonder who that is. It could be Juan. I met Juan back in FX Vision. Besides Sergio. No, besides Sergio. Yeah, it's probably Juan. Is Juan in here? No, he's not. Yeah, he is. Right, so Juan is here, right? He's literally seen. Oh no, yeah, Road to Blue days. If you know me from Road to Blue, you're like right around where Juan is. Right? So you guys literally saw me, like this model, this entire high RR stuff, you guys literally saw me create this, right? Through your eyes, right? And what pisses me off is that this entire model is now reduced to a cheap marketing tactic of 1 to 100. Right? So I told myself, as soon as that happened, I told myself I'm not going to teach this in that way. Right? Even though it's technically my method, right? I genuinely dislike that, how it's seen as a cheap marketing tactic now. But I don't teach you guys 1 to 100. I teach you guys what creates the 1 to 100s. Right? All that 1 to 100 is a pretty way of saying sniper entry. Right? But it's a misleading quote because when you take partials, right? Like you take partials technically here, right? If you take off 30%, right? Let's do the math. Let's do the math, right? So let's see. Let's say you have 100% volume. Let's say you have 5 lots, right? 5.0, right? If I were to hold this the entire way, right, at the 1 to 100, right? So a 1 to 100 on a 5 lot, right? That means that's 100 pips ish, right? Meaning 50 bucks per pip. That's, hold on, where the fuck is my, right? So 50 bucks, right? Times 100, that's 5K, right? 5K. So if at 1 to 30, okay, we'll say 1 to 30 here, 1 to 25. If at 1 to 25, where is this? Okay, right here. So if at 1 to 25, right, you take 30% of your position, right, or let's say 40% just to make the numbers a lot better, right? So that means you got 25 pips at 5.0. Let me see how to do this. Okay, so let's say you got 25 pips at 5.0, right? So where's my phone? I'm not gonna do the math on that. No, 50 times 25. Right, that's 1250. But the rest of the 75 pips are now at pretty much a 4 lot. So that's 40 times 75. That's now 3K. Right? So it's still a 1 to 100, but you've now made 4250. Right? So you've now made about 20% less that you could have made. Right? So in theory, right, it's not a 1 to 100. Right? Which is why I don't teach it like that, because it's a misconception, it's misleading, right? And I don't do that. I don't like doing that. Right, so that's my rant on everything today. Yeah, keywords 1 to 100. All marketing tactic. Oh, my back. But yeah, other than that, I don't have anything else for today. Right, summary of today. Right, overall structure. Never broke. Right, I'm pretty sure I showed the chart on this yesterday. Right, and EURUSD, same thing. Right, low, high, retracement, potential, impulsive move. All right, overall move. Daily's bullish. H4 is not bullish. Right, so it's not an excuse to risk. And this is one of your actual safest entries, to be honest. Right, if we just have a continuation. Or like 3.5. Oh, and then also that's like you made 20% less, right? But who's to say you don't scale out twice, you know? So now you could have potentially made about half, right? But the thing is like, let's say you don't have to scale out, right? But in theory, right, you have to, because at the end of the day, you really don't know what's going to happen. Drop the surprise? No, that's Saturday. Any hints? No. Yeah, you got to pay yourself. Yeah, exactly. Because it doesn't make sense to go short here and not take partials at least here, right? Because in theory, this can still reverse on you, and it wouldn't make sense to waste all this time holding, right, just to break even and take a charges loss. All right, scaling out is essentially the best way for you to cover yourself. Nah, because technically my point of invalidation is here. And the reason why that is because not only is this what created that push, right, but from a structural point, right, that's also technically a structure test here. It's a pretty cool announcement. I hope a lot more people get on now so I can like hear reactions. But yeah, other than that, I'll see you guys Saturday. No, if that breaks, the bias is invalid. All right, so when you're trading, you theoretically you want to make if then this, if this then that scenarios, right? So if this breaks, then this is not bearish. Right, but it just wouldn't make sense to me. Points of invalidation, yeah. Because all you're doing is trying to make the highest probable scenario for you. Oh, 118, yeah, that's nice. I'd love to see that as the farthest that this would go. So hopefully London just drops this, and then tomorrow London we get tomorrow in New York we get a solid setup. Gym tomorrow, gym every day. Bro, what this entire recording just stopped. When the fuck did this happen? Why does this do this, man? Okay, we got 20 minutes. Oh, that's irritating. Wait, what the hell? Dude, this call didn't record. It did it again. What's today? The 21st. Are you fucking serious? Wow, this entire thing didn't record. That's shitty. I don't know why my computer does that, man. Now it doesn't even... What the hell is going on? Like, literally nothing recorded. That doesn't make sense. 10:14, 10:17, nothing recorded. Oh, that's annoying. All right, you know what I'm gonna do? I'm gonna end this call. I'm gonna redo that whole fucking commentary, but I'm not doing it on Zoom. Start using OBS again. I would, but it kills the quality. Like, the quality sucks compared to when I screen record. That pisses me off. That was like a 40-minute commentary. All right, guys. End this call, Sergio. I need to redo this, because then I don't want the guys tomorrow to miss out on whatever I said. No way. Well.